I was making dinner when a cop knocked on my door. Ma'am, your son was in a car accident and died an hour ago. That was impossible. No, my son is asleep upstairs. The police officer looked confused. I led him upstairs to the room. Then he pulled out his gun. Ma'am, he told me, his voice tight. Step away from him. That is not your son. I'm glad you're here. If you are watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I am in my small kitchen, preparing dinner with busy hands. The old radio on the shelf is playing a sad old ballad, one of those my husband John loved before he passed away 10 years ago. I glance out the window and see the rain is really coming down, the drops splashing all the way to the gas stove. Oh no, I mutter as I close the window. I don't want the wind to blow out the flame. Dinner tonight is just for me. Andrew, my son, just got home from work, drenched from the afternoon downpour. About 20 minutes ago, Andrew walked into the house, leaving a trail of mud from his shoes on the tile floor. He didn't say much, just walked past the kitchen and put his hand on my shoulder. Mom, I'm wiped out, he said in a deep voice, as if he had been running all day. I think I'm going to sleep early. I have a meeting tomorrow. I looked up and noticed his red eyes, probably from lack of sleep. Remember to change out of that raincoat, you're soaked through, I told him, my tone a mix of scolding and affection. He nodded without much interest and shuffled his feet toward his upstairs study, where he usually stays up late typing on the computer. I watched him go, thinking about how that tall, thin body I used to carry in my arms now looked so heavy. I had just set the plates on the table and was about to sit down to eat when the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the rain, sharp and cold, and it startled me. Who could that be at this hour? I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door. Outside were two police officers, one with his cap in his hand and the other with a notepad. Their raincoats were soaked and dripping on the porch. The taller one, with a stern face, introduced himself as Lieutenant Miller. He looked at me with a heavy look in his eyes and said in a somber voice, "Ma'am, we deeply regret to inform you that your son, Mr. Andrew, died in a traffic accident an hour ago." I felt like I had been hit over the head. I stood paralyzed, my hand still on the doorknob. "That can't be right," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "He's upstairs sleeping." Miller frowned and exchanged a look with his partner. "Are you sure?" he asked cautiously. "Of course I am." I nearly screamed. I spoke to him less than an hour ago. My heart was pounding 1,000,000 miles an hour like it wanted to jump out of my chest. Andrew had just been here, in the kitchen, his hand on my shoulder. How is this possible? Miller signaled to his partner and then turned back to me. "We need to verify it just to be sure. Could you take us to his room?" I nodded, my head spinning. "He just went up." "He must be sound asleep," I muttered as if trying to convince myself. I opened the door wide, invited them in, and guided them up the stairs with trembling steps. The house is small, with only a few rooms, so we quickly reached the door to Andrew's room. I knocked softly twice. "Andrew, honey?" There was no answer. I gently pushed the door open and saw the dim yellow light from the nightstand lamp illuminating a lump under the covers. "See?" I said, pointing to the bed with relief. "There he is sleeping." But Miller raised a hand to stop me. He drew his gun and said in a low but firm voice, "Ma'am, please step away from him." "That is not—" "Step back. Let me check." Panic set in, and I backed up toward the door, not understanding what was happening. Miller approached and yanked the blanket back hard. Underneath, there was nothing, just the dented pillow, and off to the side, a jacket and several towels arranged to look like a person. I stood there, mouth open, unable to say a word. The other police officer looked at me suspiciously. "Are you sure you saw Mr. Andrew?" I was shaking, gripping the doorframe. "I spoke to him less than an hour ago. I heard him say he was going to sleep." My head was buzzing as if someone was squeezing my heart. Where was Andrew? If that wasn't him, then who was in the kitchen? Who put their hand on my shoulder and spoke to me with that tired voice? Miller whispered something into his radio and then addressed his partner. "Possible setup. Take notes." He looked at me, the tension in his face slightly diminished but still serious. "Carol, please come with us to the living room. We need to talk a little more." I nodded, but my feet didn't want to move. I looked back at the empty room, the nightstand lamp still on, illuminating a cold bed. My heart sank. Andrew, my son, the person I loved most in this world, where had he gone? If he wasn't here, then what was happening? I sank into the old armchair in the living room, hugging a cup of tea that had gone completely cold. The warmth from earlier had turned into a cold that seeped into my bones. My mind was clouded, trapped in a nightmare with no way out. The rain outside had eased up, but every drop falling from the roof onto the patio sounded like a punch to my heart, one after the other. The house, already small, seemed to want to swallow me with its silent shadows in the corners. I looked toward the staircase, where the light from Andrew's room still peeked out, a blurry reminder that my son was no longer there. Lieutenant Miller sat across from me, in the wooden chair Andrew used to eat breakfast with me. He opened his small notepad. His gaze was penetrating, but his voice remained polite. "Carol, could you tell me exactly the last time you spoke with Mr. Andrew?" I took a deep breath, trying to anchor my mind in reality. I looked at the wall clock. The hands had just passed midnight. "Around 9-something in the evening," I replied, my voice steady even though my hands were trembling. "He had just gotten home from work, said he was tired and was going to sleep. I even told him to change his raincoat because he was soaked." Miller nodded, wrote something down, and looked up. "According to the report, the accident occurred around 9:15 p.m. The car went down a ravine and exploded. Inside, we found IDs in Andrew's name." I frowned, my head spinning. "What car?" "Andrew uses the company shuttle. He doesn't drive." I remembered perfectly. His company had vans for employees, and Andrew never liked driving. He said the city traffic stressed him out, especially at rush hour. Miller turned a page in his notepad, his voice monotonous. "It was a rental car, rented through an app. We have confirmation that it was rented at 7 p.m. today." I nearly jumped up, my voice cracking with anger and confusion. "Impossible. Andrew was in a meeting all afternoon. He got home almost at 9. How could he rent a car at 7? I looked directly into Miller's eyes, as if expecting him to confirm that it was all a terrible mistake. But he just remained silent for a few seconds, his gaze thoughtful. "You can request a DNA test if you have doubts," he said, his voice soft but firm. I nodded immediately without hesitation. "I want to do it. I know my son. I'm sure something here isn't right." Inside me, a small flame of hope ignited. If it wasn't Andrew, then my son was still alive, somewhere. But immediately, fear returned. If it wasn't him, who had died? And why were Andrew's IDs in that car? While Miller communicated with the medical examiner by radio, I grabbed my cell phone and dialed Vanessa's number, my daughter-in-law. I called once, no answer. The second time, just a lifeless tone. I called 5 more times, and with each call my heart beat faster, about to burst. Finally, I sent her a message, my hands shaking so much I misspelled a few words. "Vanessa, call me as soon as you can. Something very serious happened with Andrew." Miller returned, his voice serious. "We will conduct the DNA test tonight. Get some rest, Carol. We will inform you of the results as soon as possible." I shook my head, my eyes burning. "I'm going to wait," I insisted. "I can't sleep without knowing where my son is." He looked at me with a flash of compassion but said nothing more. He signaled to his partner to leave, leaving me alone in the cold living room. I got up, went to the kitchen, grabbed a rag, trying to do something to keep from going crazy. But my hands were shaking so much that the rag fell to the floor. I picked it up and called Vanessa again. Still no answer. The clock struck 2 a.m. when the doorbell rang again. I jumped and rushed to open it. It was Miller, his face gloomier than ever. He didn't mince words. "Carol, the DNA results just came in. The body in the car does not share DNA with you. The deceased is not your son." I jumped to my feet, my legs shaking so much I had to grab the armchair. "Then where is my son?" I asked, my voice broken, a mix of relief and terror. Relief because Andrew wasn't dead. Terror because if he wasn't, where had he gone? And why did he disappear? Miller put a hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently, as if to give me strength. As of now, we are officially opening a missing person investigation. We will review every lead, his phone, bank accounts, people he had contact with. Try to stay calm. But how was I supposed to stay calm? I looked at him and tears welled up. He's the only thing I have. Andrew is everything to me. If anything happens to him, I don't know how I could go on living. Miller nodded, his voice grave. I understand, Carol. We will do everything possible. He gave me a business card, asking me to call him if I remembered anything unusual. When he left, I stood in the middle of the living room, gripping the card so tightly that I wrinkled it. I looked toward the staircase, toward Andrew's room that was still lit. I didn't know what was lurking around my family, but a terrible feeling invaded me and squeezed my heart. Andrew didn't disappear on his own. Someone was hiding something. I opened my eyes the next morning, the sunlight streaming through the curtains and illuminating the cold floor. I hadn't slept at all, just lay there, staring at the ceiling while tears fell silently. I dragged my feet to the kitchen and made myself a cup of black coffee, just like I do every morning since John died. The steam from the cup brought back memories of past mornings, when Andrew was a child and sat at the table, telling stories from school while nibbling on a pastry. Now the kitchen was empty. Only the ticking of the clock and the bitter smell of coffee could be heard. I picked up my cell phone and checked again. No missed calls from Vanessa. That struck me as very strange. I searched local news online, trying to find information about the accident last night that Miller mentioned. But there was nothing, not a single line. The worry grew, like an icy wave washing over my body. Could it all be a mistake? Or was there something bigger being hidden? At 7:45 sharp, the phone vibrated. It was Miller. His voice sounded heavier, as if carrying a weight. Carol, we have officially registered the case as a disappearance. We want to ask you more about Mr. Andrew's recent relationships. Could we see you this morning? I nodded even though he couldn't see me and said, Of course, come to my house. I'm here. I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to miss the slightest chance that Andrew might suddenly return. Miller and his partner arrived at 8:30 with a folder and a laptop. They sat on the sofa. I served them water, trying to remain calm, even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Miller opened his notepad, his gaze sharp, but his voice gentle. Did you notice any strange behavior in Mr. Andrew lately? Anything, no matter how small, could help us. I took a deep breath, trying to sort through my fragmented memories. Andrew? He was very stressed about work. Lately, he talked less, as if he were hiding something. But I thought it was just pressure from the company. But Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, she was definitely acting weird. Miller frowned, writing quickly. Weird how, Carol? I hesitated for a moment. I didn't want to speak ill of my daughter-in-law, but the truth was the truth. They fought all the time. Vanessa suspected Andrew was cheating on her with a secretary from the office, a woman named Lucy. I don't believe it. That's not like Andrew, but Vanessa. Sometimes she would leave the house at night without telling me or Andrew where she was going. Miller nodded, his voice calm. Has Vanessa left home before without warning? I nodded, lowering my voice. Yes, lately she said she was staying overnight at the office. Once she didn't come back for several days. I remembered a night a few weeks ago when I went to Andrew and Vanessa's house to bring them some food. I heard Vanessa yelling from the bedroom. Do you think I'm stupid? That woman is always hanging all over you. And you act innocent? Andrew's voice replied, tired but patient. Stop getting ideas, Vanessa. Lucy and I are just co-workers. I stayed outside, not wanting to interfere, but my heart sank. Miller looked up from his notepad. Do you know where Lucy works? Or do you have any information about her? I nodded, struggling to remember. She works at Nexus Tech, Andrew's company. He's a project director there. Lucy is his secretary. I heard him mention her a couple of times, but only in passing. Miller immediately pulled out his phone and contacted Nexus Tech HR. After a few minutes, he turned to me, his voice serious. Andrew didn't show up for work today. He didn't ask for time off. He didn't notify anyone. I felt my heart clench. Andrew didn't go to the company? Then where had he gone? Miller continued. Do you have any recent photos of Vanessa and Andrew? We want to give them to the search team. I got up, my feet heavy, and walked toward the bookshelf where I keep the family albums. I pulled out a photo from 3 weeks ago, where the three of us were standing in front of the house. Andrew was hugging Vanessa around the shoulders, both smiling. I was in the middle, also smiling. But now that I looked at it, I noticed Vanessa's smile looked forced, as if she were hiding a secret. Miller took the photo, observing it carefully. They look very happy, he said with a hint of sadness. I shook my head, a bitter taste in my mouth. Only on the outside. Inside, it was all distrust. I told him more about Vanessa's temper tantrums, the times Andrew came home with an exhausted look, as if he carried the whole world on his shoulders. Miller took note of everything and stood up. We're going to check the company first. We'll talk to Lucy and the others involved. You rest, we'll be in touch as soon as we have news. When the door closed, I stood in the doorway, watching the patrol car disappear into the morning fog. My heart sank with a premonition that something very big was being hidden. Early that afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee in my hands and my head in a mess, the phone vibrated and made me jump. It was Miller. His voice was brief but urgent. Carol, we are at Nexus Tech. Would you like to come? There are some things we need you to hear directly. I didn't think twice. I just replied, I'm on my way. I quickly put on a clean blouse, grabbed my purse and ordered a taxi straight to Andrew's company. My heart pounded the entire way, as if every turn of the tires brought me closer to the truth, or an even more terrifying secret. When the taxi stopped in front of the gleaming glass building of Nexus Tech, I felt a weight on my chest. This was the place where Andrew had spent almost 10 years of his life, working himself to exhaustion to build his career. I entered the lobby, and the young receptionist looked up with a familiar smile. Good morning, Mrs. Carroll. We didn't see Mr. Andrew come in today. Her voice was casual, as if it were a normal conversation. I forced a smile and said calmly, I'm here to clear up a couple of things. She nodded and pointed me toward the third-floor conference room where Miller was waiting for me. I walked down the hallway. The smell of cleaner and the hum of the air conditioning gave me a chill. Through the frosted glass of the conference room, I saw Miller talking to a young woman. It had to be Lucy. She was hunched in her chair, her shoulders slumped and her hands gripping the edge of the table. When Miller signaled me to enter, I pushed the door open, trying to maintain my composure despite the storm I felt inside. Lucy looked up. Her eyes met mine, and she quickly looked down, as if she didn't dare face me. Miller stood up and pulled a chair closer for me. Carol, we would like you to hear Lucy's side of the story if you agree. I nodded and sat down, clenching my hands to stop them from shaking. Lucy took a deep breath and began to speak in a trembling voice. Mrs. Carroll, I apologize if my presence caused a misunderstanding between you and Mr. Andrew. She paused, as if searching for words. I stared at her, saying nothing, but my gaze surely said everything. I wanted the truth. Lucy began her story in a low but clear voice. She said she had admired Andrew for a long time, not just for being her boss, but for his dedication and talent. I sometimes sought out conversation with him, looked for excuses to stay late working with him. Sometimes, on purpose, I made people think that there was something between Mr. Andrew and me. But he was always very professional. One time, he called me into his office and told me directly that he only loved his wife and didn't want any more misunderstandings. He asked me to keep my distance. Lucy lowered her head, and tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't think things would go this far. I remained silent, feeling a huge weight on my chest. Andrew, always so proper, had tried to protect his family. But Lucy's foolishness had complicated everything. Miller turned to her, his voice calm but cutting. Did Vanessa know you were creating these misunderstandings? Lucy nodded through sobs. She once found me talking alone with Mr. Andrew in the hallway when she came to bring him food. I was just asking him about a project, but she looked at me with eyes as if she wanted to hit me. she got very angry and left. I remembered the times Vanessa came to my house, frowning, to tell me her suspicions about Andrew. "Mom, he's changed," she had told me once, her voice full of bitterness. "He stays late at the office and that secretary is always with him." I had tried to calm her down, tell her Andrew wasn't a cheater, but now, sitting here, listening to Lucy's confession, I realized that Vanessa's suspicions were not entirely unfounded. They had just been exaggerated by the reckless actions of a young woman. Miller took notes carefully and then asked, "Do you know what happened to Andrew last night?" Lucy shook her head, her voice firm. "I was on duty on another floor. I didn't see him since the afternoon." Miller nodded and indicated that Lucy could leave. She stood up, apologized to me once more, and left. I said nothing, just followed her with my gaze, my heart heavy. Lucy might have made a mistake, but she wasn't the main cause of Andrew's disappearance. There was something bigger, darker, lurking. After the meeting, Miller invited me to a small coffee shop next to the office to continue talking. We sat in a secluded corner. The noise of the coffee machine and the smell of toast made the atmosphere a little less tense. Miller looked at me and said in a low voice, "If what Lucy says is true, Andrew was never unfaithful, but Vanessa was convinced he was." I nodded, a bitter taste in my mouth. Unfounded jealousy. It's the poison of the soul. I remembered Andrew and Vanessa's fights, the nights she left home, the times Andrew came back with a tired look, as if he were trying to prevent everything from collapsing. Before saying goodbye, I took Miller's hand, my voice firm. "I don't know where my son is, but if he's still alive, I'm going to find him." He nodded with an understanding look. "We will too, Carol. I promise we won't give up." We shook hands, and I left the coffee shop, heading out onto the street bathed in the afternoon sun. The leaves on the trees in front of the company swayed in the wind, but I didn't feel any warmth. My heart was frozen as if an invisible fear was strangling it. On the way home, I thought about Lucy's look, a mixture of shame and regret. She wasn't the biggest problem. The problem was Vanessa and the doubts that had gnawed at her trust. If Vanessa believed Andrew had betrayed her, what would she have been capable of doing for revenge? 2 days passed since Andrew's disappearance, but every second felt like an eternity. I woke up early when the sunrise barely painted the old walls of my little house yellow. I sat at the dining room table, looking at the empty chair where Andrew used to sit, my heart tied in a knot. On the table, his coffee cup was still there, with a dry stain on the rim, a small but painful trace that reminded me my son had been here just a few days earlier. I touched the cup as if I could feel Andrew's warmth, but I only felt the cold of the porcelain. The phone vibrated, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Miller. His voice was grave and clear, as if he were trying to maintain composure. "Carol, we want to ask you about properties, insurance policies, and other financial matters related to Mr. Andrew. Could we see you today?" I was a little surprised, but immediately, an old phrase Vanessa had said echoed in my head like a knife. "If you died, at least you'd leave me the $10 million from the insurance." At the time, I thought it was just something she said in anger, but now it gave me a chill. Had I overlooked a crucial clue? I got up and walked toward the small safe in the closet where Andrew kept his important papers. My hands trembled as I opened it and took out a folder. Inside, I found Andrew's life insurance policy, signed 2 years ago. I read every line, and my heart pounded when I saw the beneficiary's name, Vanessa Fernandez. The amount, $10 million. I squeezed the paper, feeling it burn in my hands. Without hesitation, I called Miller. "Lieutenant, I found Andrew's insurance policy. The beneficiary is Vanessa. You need to see this." Less than an hour later, Miller and a colleague, a financial specialist named Sarah, arrived at my house. They sat in the living room reviewing the contract carefully. Sarah turned the pages, her voice monotonous but sharp. "Insured amount of $10 million payable in case of accidental death. The contract is very clear." Miller looked at me serious. If this was a setup, the first beneficiary is the one who collects the insurance. His words were like a hammer blow to my head. Vanessa? Could she be involved? I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to fit together and each one made my heart sink. I clenched my hands, my voice trembling. I want you to go ask the insurance company. Maybe Vanessa has already shown up. I need to know what she's done. Miller nodded and told Sarah to get ready. Do you want to come with us? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes, I want to hear everything with my own ears. I couldn't stay home, waiting any longer. Andrew was my son, and I needed the truth, no matter how painful. The insurance company was in a modern glass building in the commercial district, half an hour from my house. When we entered, the receptionist smiled kindly and guided us to the 5th floor. A middle-aged man, who introduced himself as Scott Jenkins, the area manager, received us in a small office overlooking the busy street. He checked some files on his computer and then looked up, his voice calm. Yes, Mrs. Vanessa Fernandez came to this office on Monday to ask about the procedures for collecting Mr. Andrew Quintero's life insurance. My blood ran cold. Monday? That was the day before Andrew disappeared. I immediately asked, my voice cracking. Did she come alone? Scott frowned, typed something else, and turned the screen toward us. The security camera image appeared. Vanessa, in a white blouse and sunglasses, entering with a tall man in a gray suit. He was slightly turned away, but I saw him put his hand on her shoulder, as if he were comforting or guiding her. Miller signaled for me to give him Andrew's photo. I took it out of my purse and placed it on the desk. Scott immediately shook his head. It's not this person. The man accompanying Mrs. Fernandez was not Mr. Quintero. My heart skipped a beat. If it wasn't Andrew, who was it? Miller asked for the security camera photos to be printed as evidence. When they gave it to me, I took it with trembling hands. The man's face in the photo was blurry, but something felt familiar. I looked closer, and suddenly, like a flash of lightning, I recognized him. I pointed to the photo, my voice trembling but sure. I know this man. His name is Julian Hayes. He is my son's biggest rival in business. Miller turned to look at me, his eyes sharp as knives. Are you sure? I nodded and the memories flooded back. Andrew had told me about Julian, a fierce competitor in the construction sector. He had tried to buy Nexus Tech, but Andrew refused. Once, Andrew came home very tense and told me, Mom, Julian Hayes is not a good person. He plays dirty and I have to be careful. At the time, I thought it was just work stuff. But now, seeing him in that photo with Vanessa, an icy fear ran down my spine. Miller clenched his fists, his voice determined. We could be facing a conspiracy to commit fraud. I'm going to ask the investigation team to check into Julian Hayes immediately. He turned to Sarah and ordered her to analyze Vanessa and Julian's bank accounts and transactions. Then he looked at me, his voice softer. Carol, you've done a great job, but I need you to stay calm. We are getting closer to the truth. Leaving the insurance company, I walked toward the street. The midday sun was bright, but it couldn't dispel the cold I felt inside. I said to Miller in a low voice, full of doubt. If Andrew was behind this, as you suspected, he wouldn't be so foolish as to talk to me and have the car explode at the same time. And if he planned it, why didn't he come here with Vanessa? Miller nodded, his gaze thoughtful. You're right. Something doesn't add up. We're going to investigate it. On the way home, sitting in the taxi, I looked out the window without seeing anything. The image of Vanessa and Julian on the security camera tormented me. Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, whom I once considered a daughter, could she have betrayed Andrew? And Julian, what did he want? The insurance money? Or revenge on Andrew for his business failures? Did Andrew know about Vanessa and Julian's plan? Did he disappear on purpose to protect me or to save himself? The next morning, just as the sun was rising, the phone rang. I answered immediately. It was Miller. His voice was brief but sharp. Carol, we have verified the information about Julian Hayes. Can you come to the station right now? There are some things you need to see. I quickly put on a light sweater, went out to the street, and took a taxi to the police station. In the car, I gripped my purse, my heart tied in a knot. When I entered Miller's office, He was already sitting at his desk with a thick folder in front of him. He slid it towards me, his voice grave. Julian Hayes, CEO of Hayes Solutions, direct competitor of Andrew's Nexus Tech. They have competed for 3 major projects in the last 2 years, and there are rumors that Julian tried to play dirty, even bribing investors to win contracts. I reviewed the folder, and my eyes stopped at Julian's photo. His face was cold, his eyes sharp as knives. I pointed to the photo, my voice trembling. It's him! It's the same man I saw in a video call with Vanessa. I remembered that afternoon perfectly. Vanessa had come home with a cake box, but she was restless, checking her phone constantly. When I asked her, she said it was work, but I overheard a man's voice and the name Julian. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now everything made sense. Miller nodded, his gaze more penetrating. We put a team on tracking Vanessa's cell phone. The signal was detected in Maplewood Heights, a nearby municipality, around 4 a.m. after the accident. My heart sank. Maplewood Heights? What was Vanessa doing there? And why did she disappear right after sending the message saying Andrew was hurt? Miller continued. We sent an undercover team to the area of the last signal. After 2 days of surveillance, they discovered Vanessa living in a house on the outskirts of Maplewood Heights with a man. He paused, looking at me as if to prepare me. We confirmed that man is Julian Hayes. Several neighbors in the area say they act like husband and wife. Very affectionate, they go to the market together. They even kiss on the street. I was paralyzed, as if my blood had stopped. Vanessa and Julian living as husband and wife, while Andrew, my son, was missing, possibly in danger. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms until it hurt. Miller passed me a stack of photos taken from a distance. Vanessa and Julian, holding hands, coming out of a small store. Vanessa's smile in the photo sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't the smile of a wife worried about her husband. It was the smile of someone hiding something. Miller continued. We reviewed the videos from neighbors' cameras near the accident scene. A clip from a house across the street shows Vanessa near the location, just hours before the car exploded. He opened his laptop and showed me the video. Under the dim light of a street lamp, I clearly saw Vanessa, wearing the blue jacket I had washed last week. She was walking quickly, looking around as if she feared being seen. My heart was about to jump out of my chest. It's her, I whispered, my voice broken. That jacket. I washed it for her. Miller nodded, his voice firm. This evidence is enough to confirm that Vanessa not only knew about the accident, but was at the scene. I clenched my fists. Tears welled up, but I held them back. In my mind, there was no longer any doubt. Vanessa not only knew, she had planned it. But why? Miller gave orders to his team, his voice cautious. Don't approach yet. Keep watching. We need to know what they are hiding. I looked at him, my voice trembling. What if they have Andrew locked up? What if they have him somewhere? Miller didn't answer immediately, but his gaze darkened, as if he too was thinking the worst. We are considering all possibilities, Carol. Tonight the team will stake out the house in Maplewood Heights to monitor every move. I nodded, but inside fear had turned into a storm. If Andrew was alive, if he was kidnapped, every minute that passed was a minute I wouldn't forgive myself for not having found him sooner. Miller put a hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle. Carol, I know this is very difficult, but you have to be strong. We are doing everything we can. I looked at him and tears rolled down my cheeks. He's the only thing I have, Lieutenant. Andrew is everything to me. If anything happens to him, I don't know how I could go on living. Leaving the police station, I walked toward the street. The sky was clouding over, reflecting my mood. I arrived home, pushed the door open, and the silence seemed terrifying. I stood in front of the small altar in a corner where I have a photo of John and a crucifix. I lit a candle. The smoke rose slowly, carrying my prayer. Sweetie, I know you're alive. I'm going to find you, and whether it's Vanessa or whoever, I'm going to bring it to light. I knelt down, gripping the rosary as my tears fell to the floor. But inside me, a flame of determination began to burn. 3 days passed since the police confirmed Vanessa was living with Julian in Maplewood Heights. They still hadn't acted. Early in the morning, the doorbell rang. It was Miller. He came in with a thick folder, his eyes full of determination but also a trace of tiredness. He put the folder on the table, his voice grave. "Carol, these are the photos the surveillance team took in Maplewood Heights." I opened the folder, my heart racing. The first photo chilled me. Vanessa, in a thin nightgown, stepped out onto the balcony of the house and handed Julian a cup of coffee. He hugged her, kissed her on the forehead, and they both laughed like a happy couple. I started shaking, pointing at the photo, my voice broken. She was in my house, calling me Mom. How could she do this? Miller put a hand on the table, his gaze cold as steel. "We need to know if they have Andrew kidnapped. Do you remember any place Vanessa or Julian frequented? Somewhere unusual that might be related?" I took a deep breath, searching my memories. Suddenly, a conversation from a month ago popped into my mind. Vanessa was in my kitchen, talking softly on the phone. "Okay, Julian, tonight I'll pick up the truck to take the stuff to the abandoned cabin outside." At the time, I thought she was joking or it was work-related. But now, that phrase was like a light in the darkness. I looked at Miller, my voice trembling. "There is a place. An abandoned wooden cabin, about 45 minutes from the city, near the old pine forest. Vanessa mentioned it once talking to Julian." Miller straightened up immediately, taking notes. "Do you know the exact location?" I nodded, describing it in detail. "It's a dirt road near a wooden bridge that crosses a stream. The cabin is hidden behind some large pines. No one has lived there in years." Miller didn't hesitate. He pulled out his radio and ordered the surveillance team to expand the search radius in that direction. In the afternoon, Miller called again, his voice more urgent. "Carol, we just detected the signal of an old truck with fake license plates. This vehicle appeared near the accident scene. With satellite data, we confirmed it stopped near the cabin you described." My heart stopped. The abandoned cabin. Could Andrew be there? I gripped the rosary in my hand, trying to stay calm. "What are you going to do?" I asked, trembling. Miller replied, "We already sent a special operations group dressed in civilian clothes to inspect. Another team is still monitoring the house in Maplewood Heights." Time passed with unbearable slowness. Every minute was an hour. I sat in the living room hugging my rosary, my eyes fixed on the clock. I prayed, whispering to myself, "Andrew, you're alive, aren't you? I'm coming for you, sweetie." Near midnight, the phone vibrated. It was Miller. "Carol, we just saw Vanessa and Julian get into a car and leave Maplewood Heights. They are heading straight for the cabin." I jumped up, my heart pounding. "I want to go," I said without thinking. Miller hesitated. "Carol, it's very dangerous. Let us handle it." But I insisted. "I have to know if my son is there. I won't do anything foolish, but I have to go." Finally, Miller agreed. He picked me up in a silver SUV with no police logos. We drove down dark roads, the headlights illuminating rows of tall pines. As we approached the cabin, Miller instructed me to stay still in the car while he and his team approached. Over the radio, I heard his broken voice. A light just came on. "There are people inside." I squeezed the rosary with all my might. I felt like my heart was going to break. "Andrew, are you there?" The team reported through a crack they saw Andrew. My son, emaciated, his hands tied, lying on the cold wooden floor. Vanessa and Julian entered with a tray of food and a bottle of water. Vanessa set the tray on the floor, her voice icy. "Just a few more days. As soon as the insurance money is in the account, we're getting out of here to live like kings. By then, you'll be free, my love." Julian laughed and gave Andrew a little kick. "Your mom must be crying her eyes out, huh?" Everything went just as we planned. I heard those words over the radio, and tears streamed down, but not from pain. It was rage, a fire that ignited inside me. Andrew was alive, but he was kidnapped, treated like a hostage by the very woman he loved. I wanted to run out, but Miller signaled me to be quiet. He grabbed his radio, his voice firm. "We have enough evidence. Go in now. 4 officers in bulletproof vests burst into the cabin through the front and back doors almost simultaneously. There was a loud noise, a quick and controlled chaos. Over the radio, I heard Julian scream, then a dull thud as he was tackled and his head hit a table. Vanessa was screaming, terrified. "What are you doing? Let me go!" I wanted to rush over, but an officer stopped me, his voice severe. "Carol, please stay here. We'll bring Andrew out right away." I stayed there trembling, my eyes glued to the old wooden door. Then I heard Andrew's voice, weak but clear. "Where's my mom? Is she okay?" His words pierced my heart. He was worried about me, even in the midst of his own hell. Miller replied, his voice reassuring, "We're here. Your mom is waiting outside." I couldn't contain myself anymore. I opened the car door and ran toward the cabin, ignoring the officer's warning glance. I needed to see Andrew. I needed to know he was alive. When I entered, Miller was helping Andrew up, cutting the rope from his hands. Andrew was emaciated, pale, with red eyes, but they lit up when he saw me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice almost gone. I knelt down and hugged him with all my strength, crying uncontrollably. "Andrew, sweetie, I'm here. I found you." He hugged me back, his trembling hands clutching my shoulders. "I thought I would never see you again," he whispered in my ear, his voice choked. I held him tighter as if I feared that if I let go he would disappear again. The ambulance arrived shortly after. The paramedics checked Andrew, bandaging the wounds on his wrists and ankles. I sat beside him holding his hand, not taking my eyes off him for a second. Andrew looked at me and smiled weakly. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't want you to worry. I was just trying to keep you safe." I shook my head and the tears started again. "You're silly, Andrew. I'm your mother. I'm supposed to protect you." He nodded, but his gaze was full of pain, as if he blamed himself for letting things get this far. At the police station, Vanessa and Julian were taken to separate interrogation rooms. Miller invited me to watch as a witness, but I could only observe from behind a mirror. Vanessa was sitting, head bowed, silent as a statue. Miller began the interrogation, his voice calm but sharp. "Mrs. Fernandez, the DNA test showed that the body in the accident was not Andrew Quintero. Do you have anything to say?" Vanessa didn't answer, but I saw her shoulders trembling. Her lawyer, sitting next to her, whispered something to her, but suddenly she lifted her head, her eyes bloodshot. "It's okay," she said, her voice broken. "I'll confess everything." Vanessa's confession was another stab in my heart. She said that at first, her plan with Julian was to kill Andrew to collect the insurance. But when it came down to it, she didn't have the courage. Instead, they put sleeping pills in his drink. When he was drowsy, Julian snuck into the house, carried him to his car, and took him to the cabin to hold him captive. Meanwhile, Vanessa went to the accident scene and burned the rental car with the body of a homeless man Julian had procured from a clandestine morgue. They chose the night to avoid being seen, and the plan was almost perfect until I insisted that I had spoken to Andrew just before the accident. That detail broke everything down. Miller kept pressing and the police found more evidence. A file on Julian's laptop with a detailed step-by-step plan to fake the accident and collect the insurance. They also found a dash cam they had removed and hidden in Vanessa's purse, which recorded her putting the body in the car before setting it on fire. Furthermore, the papers to claim the insurance were already ready, just waiting for confirmation of Andrew's death. Every detail was a blow to me. Vanessa, whom I considered family, had coldly planned to harm my son. Standing behind the mirror, I looked at Vanessa. She was no longer the young woman I knew, the one who brought flan to the house and laughed cheerfully. Now her head was bowed, her eyes lifeless, as if she had lost her soul. I didn't feel pity, only disappointment and pain. How can a person change so much? How could she betray Andrew, betray me, just for money and for a man like Julian? Miller approached, his voice grave. "Carol, thanks to your clarity and your insistence, we saved a life. If you hadn't been so sure that Andrew was still alive, we might have overlooked that cabin." I looked at him, my voice trembling but full of pride. Nobody knows their son like a mother. If I didn't believe he was alive, who else would? Miller nodded, a glint of respect in his eyes. You are a very strong mother, Carol. Andrew is lucky to have you. Leaving the police station, I returned to the hospital where Andrew was being treated. He was lying down, his face still pale but less tense. I sat beside him and took his hand, feeling the warmth of his thin fingers. Mom, Andrew said, his voice hoarse. I didn't know Vanessa was capable of something like that. I tried to protect her, to prevent everything from breaking, but I was wrong. I stroked his hair, and the tears fell again. You weren't wrong, Andrew. You just believed in love. But I'm here now, and I won't let you suffer again. The doctor said Andrew would need time to recover, both physically and emotionally. The wounds on his body would heal, but those of the soul would need much more. I looked at my son, my heart broken but full of hope. We had emerged from the darkness, and I knew that even if the road ahead was difficult, I would always be by his side. 2 weeks after Andrew's rescue, I woke up with a mixture of relief and heaviness. Andrew was home, but the scars on his body and soul were still there, reminding us of everything we had been through. Today was the first hearing at the criminal courthouse in Silver Creek. I put on the blue sweater Andrew once gave me, took his hand, and along with Miller and our lawyer, we entered the room. Andrew was still weak and used a cane, but he insisted on being present. Mom, I have to face them, he told me, his voice firm although his eyes still showed pain. I nodded, squeezing his hand, promising myself to always be with him. We sat in the third row, close enough to clearly see the defendant's bench. When Vanessa Fernandez and Julian Hayes were brought in, my heart sank. They wore the gray prison uniform, handcuffed, their heads bowed. Vanessa looked up for an instant and her gaze met mine. She blinked several times, her face pale, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. I looked away. I didn't want that look to soften me. The prosecutor stood up, his voice echoing in the silent room. Today, we judged the defendants Vanessa Fernandez and Julian Hayes on charges of attempted murder, insurance fraud, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. The large screen in the room lit up, showing irrefutable evidence. The security camera video showing Vanessa near the accident, the photos of her and Julian at the insurance company, and the audio recorded in the cabin, where Vanessa coldly told Andrew her plan to collect the insurance. Every image, every sound was like a knife in my heart, but I stood tall, strong for Andrew. The medical examiner took the stand and confirmed that the body from the accident was that of a homeless man who had died of natural causes before being placed in the car. The insurance company representative also testified, stating that Vanessa had initiated the process to collect $10 million, with her signature clearly visible. I listened to every word with immense pain. How could someone plan something so meticulously to harm the person they once swore to love? When the prosecutor called Andrew to testify, I felt his hand trembling in mine. He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane, and walked toward the stand, pale but with a firm gaze. After dinner that night, Andrew began, his voice hoarse. I felt a very heavy sleep coming on, something strange, abnormal. I remember lying down in bed and then losing consciousness. When I woke up, I was tied up in a cold, closed room. I heard Vanessa laughing and saying that I should just die already. His voice cracked and the whole room fell silent. I clenched my fists, holding back tears. Andrew sat down, sweat on his forehead, and I gently wiped it away, whispering, "You did great, sweetie." The trial lasted almost all day, each minute heavier than the last. In the end, the judge allowed the defendants to give their final words. Vanessa stood up, her eyes red and her voice trembling. I lost my mind. When I thought Andrew was cheating on me, I felt so much pain, so much jealousy that I broke down. Julian appeared and told me he understood me better than anyone. I listened to him. I agreed to plan that horrible thing. But I didn't have the courage to kill anyone. I just wanted Andrew to suffer the way I suffered. But I was wrong. She bowed her head and her tears fell to the floor, but I no longer felt any compassion. Her apology could not erase the days I lived with the fear of losing my son. Julian, on the other hand, remained silent. He sat there, his gaze cold, without admitting guilt, without remorse. But the evidence was overwhelming. The file on his laptop, the dash cam hidden in Vanessa's purse, the insurance papers ready. There was no way he could deny it. The judge looked at both of them, his voice severe. Based on the evidence and testimonies, the court dictates sentence. Vanessa Fernandez, 16 years in prison, with mitigating circumstances for her confession and for not having caused the death. Julian Hayes, 25 years in prison, with aggravating circumstances for being the mastermind for his coldness and for attempting to conceal the crime. I didn't cry. I just looked at Vanessa one last time thinking, a monster doesn't always need a knife. Sometimes all it needs is a heart without trust and without reason. When they took her away, her gaze passed over me, but I didn't return it. I turned to Andrew, took his hand, and felt the warmth of his thin fingers. "Let's go, sweetie," I said softly. "Let's go home." Leaving the courthouse, Miller walked beside me, his voice grave. "Carol, this case is over, but I know what you and Andrew went through won't be easy to forget." I nodded, looking at him with gratitude. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Without you and your team, I don't know if I would have found my son." Miller smiled, his gaze warm. "You were the one who guided us to the truth. Carol, a mother's love is the greatest force I have ever witnessed." When we arrived home, I took Andrew to the living room where the afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the family photo on the shelf. Andrew sat on the sofa, looked at the photo, and said in a hoarse voice, "Mom, I thought I would never come back here." I sat beside him, stroking his hair like when he was a child. "You're home now, Andrew, and I won't let anyone hurt you again." He nodded, his eyes red, but a faint smile beginning to form. That night, I made the beef stew that Andrew loves so much, the same one I was cooking when everything started. We sat at the table, just the two of us, but this time without fear or doubt. Andrew ate slowly, looking at me occasionally as if to make sure I was still there. "Mom," he said softly, "I promise I won't hide anything from you again. I was wrong to try to solve everything alone." I smiled and put my hand over his. "And I promise you too, Andrew, I will always be here, no matter what happens." A month after the trial, Andrew's life and mine began to find a new rhythm, although the wounds inside us were still there, deep and painful. Every morning I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the sun filter through the trees in the backyard. My little house no longer felt so silent. The sound of Andrew turning the pages of a book in the living room, the noise of his small shovel as he tended the backyard garden, everything was like soft music that calmed my heart. Andrew hadn't returned to the company yet. He said he needed time to find himself again. I let him do whatever he wanted, but always by his side, cooking his favorite dishes, washing his clothes, and talking when he needed it. I didn't pressure him to talk about what happened, but every time I looked into his eyes, I saw a deep sadness, as if he blamed himself. I could only take his hand and say softly, "Everything is going to be all right, sweetie. I'm here." One morning, while hanging close in the yard, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron, opened the door, and saw Lucy. She wore a white blouse and held a small paper bag, her gaze shy. "Mrs. Carroll," she said, her voice trembling, "I came to apologize. I know I was partly to blame for all of this, if it hadn't been for my immature actions at the beginning. Perhaps Mrs. Vanessa wouldn't have misinterpreted things, and none of this would have gone so far." She bowed her head, and tears rolled down her cheeks. I looked at her with a mix of forgiveness and painful memories. Finally, I sighed and said softly, "Lucy, sometimes a look at the wrong moment can tear down a home. But at least you didn't cross the line. You recognized your mistake, and that's the most important thing." Lucy looked up, and a little hope shone in her eyes. She handed me an envelope. "This is my letter of resignation. I don't want people to think I'm staying at Nexus Tech for personal reasons. I need to leave so things can heal." I took the envelope and looked her in the eyes. Although Lucy had been wrong, she was young and remorseful. I leaned in, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "Thank you for your honesty. I wish you well in finding a new path that makes you happy." Lucy smiled faintly, nodded, and left. When her figure disappeared at the end of the street, I felt a little relief. Not everyone has the courage to face their mistakes. A week later, Andrew decided to return to Nexus Tech. I was worried, fearing that the work would exhaust him. But he smiled and said, "Mom, I need to work. I need to prove that I'm stronger after what happened." The day he returned, I stayed outside the office watching Andrew walk in. All the staff stood up and applauded him. Andrew raised his hand, smiled slightly, but I saw a new determination in his eyes. After that, he reorganized the entire company, cutting all ties with Hayes Solutions. He created an internal transparency and ethics committee, supervised by himself. "I want Nexus Tech to be a clean place, Mom," he told me that night. No more conspiracies, no more dirty games. One afternoon, Miller came to visit me. He brought a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, the flowers I once told him I liked. He sat on the sofa, looked around the little house, and said, "Carol, the police work with the law. But you work with a mother's intuition. Both are necessary, and I truly admire you." I smiled, accepting the flowers, my heart warm. "Thank you, Lieutenant, but I'm just a mother doing what a mother has to do." Miller nodded, his gaze full of respect. "You are an extraordinary mother, Carol. Andrew is proof of that." After Miller left, I sat at the table and opened John's old diary. I turned the pages, rereading what he wrote about his dreams, about our family, about Andrew. I took a pen and began to write my own story. From that fateful night they told me Andrew had an accident, to the painful days searching for the truth, and finally, the day I got my son back. I wrote slowly. Each word was a way to release repressed emotions. In the end, I wrote, "Jealousy and betrayal turn people into monsters, but justice and a mother's love will never be defeated." When I finished, I closed the diary and put it on the small altar next to John's photo. I lit a candle which carried my whisper, "John, do you see?" Our son overcame it. I kept my promise. I turned around and saw Andrew standing in the doorway, looking at me with eyes full of love. "Mom, I want to cook tonight," he said softly. "Let me take care of you the way you took care of me." We walked into the kitchen together. The sound of the knives mixed with Andrew's laughter. The little house was filled with warmth again, like the old days. I looked at my son, my heart flooded with joy and hope. We had gone through the darkness, and now the light was returning. Andrew is everything I have. And I know that no matter what the future brings, our love as mother and son will always be a flame that will never go out. After everything that happened, the greatest lesson I want to share with you, who have listened to my story until this moment, is this: a mother's love and faith in justice are stronger than any conspiracy. Jealousy, greed, or betrayal can make people lose their minds, but if we stand firm, seeking the truth and believing in love, the light will always overcome the darkness in the end. I want everyone to understand that even in the most desperate moments, you should never abandon hope and trust, because that perseverance can save a life, protect a family, and show that justice does exist. The story you just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of those involved. We are not sharing this to judge, but with the hope that someone listens and pauses to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose silence to maintain peace? Or would you dare to face everything to reclaim your own voice? I would like to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the path for someone else. God bless you all always, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I will leave you 2 of the channel's favorite stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.